Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody to another year of Saturday morning fly tying. Another year of COVID, another year of video. But anyway, I mean, it's not that cold this morning, so it wouldn't have been too bad at Cabela's, not like yesterday. But anyway, so I thought I'd go through a little bit first for those. I think pretty much everybody that's on here today was on here last year. Aside from maybe Merv. Merv, were you able to take these in last year?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. And well, welcome, Merv. So Merv's actually going to do the next fly next week, a chronomid pattern. So I've had the privilege of getting to know Merv a few times over the last few years, and he's been gracious enough to give me a few of his chronomid patterns, and I can attest to they are awesome. So I'm really looking forward to next week. I hope I can take it in. But so for those of you that weren't on the call last year or whatever, I just thought the whole purpose of this is really more to show the technique behind tying a specific fly. We don't expect that everybody has the exact materials for this, and it's totally okay if you don't. If you don't have the appropriate thread color, if you don't have this or that, make do with what you got. But the whole purpose is to learn the process behind tying these certain flies, and hopefully you enjoy it. So today I'm going to do two different jig nymphs, super easy. Like, these are the easiest flies I've probably ever tied. This first one is, and it has been an extremely productive fly for me, mostly on moving water. I don't think I've ever fished this on a lake. And I believe it was tied by, shoot, I can't remember his name now. Egan.
Lance Egan?
Lance Egan, yeah, from Flyfish Food. So kind of a variation on, I think originally came out the lightning bug, which is a really good pattern, using pearl, tinsel for the body, peacock for the thorax, and pheasant tail for the wing casing. Then kind of came the Rainbow Warrior, which was mylar body, Rainbow Souse got dubbing for the thorax, and so on. And then Lance Egan came up with this. Basically, it's called a Tungsten Surveyor, very similar to a Rainbow Warrior, but just way easier to tie, and on a jig hook. So many of you have probably seen, and probably lots of you have been using jig hooks. Really came on the scene to me a couple years ago, especially on the river side of things. Of course, we've been using them for balanced leeches for a long time, but I think the whole benefit of using these jig hooks and the slotted tungsten beads is when you're fishing in rivers, so Old Man, things like that, you get a presentation, a nymph presentation that's upside down, so it's less likely to foul up and rocks, get dull. I don't know if you get better hookups, but pardon me, this was a fly pattern that most certainly last year had huge success on the Old Man, and had a number of days where I outfished a lot of people until I actually started handing these out. So, for friends that always like to oh, I just slayed on this fly, do you have more than one? No, I don't. It's like, well, you need to start doing what I do, because whenever I slay, and you're like, oh, can I have that fly? Sure. But anyway, so I guess without further ado, and I think the kind of way we've done this in the past is I'll tie one up, or I guess I'll leave it to everybody else on the weeks that they're demonstrating, but I'll tie one up. I'll try and get this camera in nice and close, and just kind of go through the process. Again, this one's super easy, but and then I'll kind of pull it away. We'll do another one together, and then if you guys have any questions, and we can do basically three. because you guys have enough to do 2, those of you that have packaged or bought the package. So for this first one, for the guys that have the packages, you're looking for week 1. You will need the small pack of dubbing. You will need the Coq de Leon feather. I think you should each have 1 of those in there, which is more than enough to tie 2 flies. You should each have a bit of silver wire and a bit of gold wire. For this fly, we're going to use the silver. And the last thing is the Wapsi Sauska dubbing in rainbow. This is an awesome color. Again, been used on a number of effective patterns that I've used over the years on rivers like the Old Man, and works very nicely. So for thread, I like to use orange. You could use hot orange, you could use pink, whatever you want to use. I was actually just talking to somebody last night about this pattern and fishing out there, and I would like to try this pattern with a number of different thread colors, specifically black, olive. This Sauska dubbing tends to be somewhat translucent when it gets wet. So changing up your fly, like your fly thread color is definitely going to give you a different color on the fly itself once it gets wet. And I think, you know, give you some different options on what's going on. This certainly is not a fly that's going to represent anything in the water column, but it's flashy and it works good. So without further ado, I'll try and, oh boy, get this off of my face and get it on the fly.
What's this one called again, Colin?
Pardon me?
What's it called again?
Tungsten Surveyor.
Okay.
So bear with me while I try and get this zoomed in. I can't remember how I did this last year. It's getting really close. And not really working, is it? Is that okay for everybody? It's not ideal. I'd like it to be a little better, but is that okay?
It's a little out of focus.
Fine, Colin.
It's kind of, it seems to be out of focus for some reason. That's better, but anyway, so we'll try and make do. So with these tungsten slotted beads, you want to put it in with the slot towards the back of the hook. And the whole purpose of that slot is so that it'll sit down into the eye a little better. It's very hard to see, but there is, you'll if you spin it, there's one way where it won't sit down into the eye, and if you spin it the other way, it'll sit a little deeper into the eye, and that's what you want. You want it to sit right down nice and deep into the eye, and then kind of leave it there. And then what I'm going to do right off the bat is if you can see that, I'm going to pull that thread right in and suck that bead down and give a good thread base just to hold it in place so that when I'm tying that, it doesn't bounce back out. So now that bead is nice and secure and it's facing the way it should. And then I'm just going to wrap my thread back. So like I said before, this thread or this dubbing tends to be somewhat translucent. So normally on a fly, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time putting a really thick thread base on. This fly, I'm going to do that because I do want that thread to kind of shine through, for lack of a better term, once it's wet. So again, if you're using black, it's going to look a little more black. If you're using olive, it's going to look a little more olive. If you're using orange, it's going to look a little bit more orange. So now I'm going to put in my tail, which is the Coq de Leon. And you really don't need very many fibers here. I don't know. Maybe 5 to 10. They're pretty small. I wouldn't count them, but just to give it a nice tail. And I don't really measure this out, but I'd try and do it, you know, not quite the full length of the hook. And just put it in. If you don't have coq de leon, it doesn't matter. You could use anything here. I think pheasant tail would work. Any sort of hackle would be fine. I like the coq de leon. It's a little bit more mottled, speckled, so it has a little bit more, I don't know, texture to it, I guess, for lack of a better term. But yeah. And then you can tie this with or without a rib. I like to put a rib on it just to give a little more flash. Durability, I don't think is really a big benefit to doing this. It's a pretty durable fly. Like I said, it's going to float through the water column with the hook facing up. So it's rarely, I mean, they do foul. It'll get stuck in between rocks and stuff, but it's not going to bang on rocks and get dull as fast as a regular hook. So, but yeah, I like to put the ribbing in there. You definitely don't have to. I was going to say earlier too, if you want to weight these, you could definitely put in some lead wraps and wrap it just behind the eye of the hook. I would be using very thin lead on something this small, probably like 0.1, 0.15 would be even too big, I think. So, or a lot of guys are going to just larger beads, which makes it way easier to tell which one is heavier in your fly box. Once you put dubbing on it, it tends to be a little bit hard to remember which ones you weighted and which ones you didn't. So these are a 7/64 bead or 3 mil. So you could move up to like a 3.5 if you really wanted. But I don't tend to fish these overly deep. Usually fishing them as a dropper underneath a hopper or, you know, a green drake or something fairly heavy. Although at times I fish these under, you know, even an Adams at size 14. At some point they tend to pull the fly down because they're heavy if it's a smaller fly. But in most cases in fairly fast water, you're still going to get a really good drift before this actually sinks to pull that fly under. So many times I've had takes on in the same pool on an Adams, say for example, or a parachute pattern, and the next cast have a take on the nymph, and as soon as it hits the water, it's being inhaled. So I don't tend to fish these very deep. But now I seem to have misplaced my dubbing wax, so I'm just going to do it without. But here's where I would put on some dubbing wax.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know where that went, but so for dubbing, you guys, it probably looks like you have a very small amount of dubbing. You probably have enough dubbing there to do 10 flies. You don't need much. Again, less is more. Like if you can even see that on my white shirt, you can't. That's like a very small amount, but that's going to go a long ways. Like once you put that on the thread and you get a nice little dubbing noodle like that, I tend to make my dubbing noodles fairly small and make multiple wraps versus making them really thin. And then it's just a lot harder to control. When they're really thick, they tend to lay back over on themselves. So again, less is always more with dubbing. If you guys can see, like that's a pretty small, pretty thin dubbing noodle. And I'm just going to make touching wraps all the way forward. And I'm just going to go back and forth until I get a nice taper on the body. I'm going to put some more dubbing in here just because I don't have a lot of room in between my fly and the camera. And again, we just want a nice taper on that. That still doesn't seem to focus in there, eh? If you can see that. I guess I picked the wrong day to wear a white shirt tying a white fly, but
Works really well.
that's really it. Just get a nice looking taper and then you can do your ribbing. Doesn't really matter which way you do this, I don't think. I just like to get a nice even spacing. I tend to wrap my ribbing on something like this, the same direction as my thread. But in a lot of cases, it's more beneficial to wrap it the other way. But in this, because it's a dub body, I don't think it really matters. And then I'm just going to make a nice hot spot of orange at that tip or at the head and whip finish it. So again, like this is the kind of fly patterns that I really like to tie. A, really easy. B, really quick. 3, durable. And 4, they catch fish. So there's no need to really get fancy. This has outproduced a ton of other nymphs that I've used that take 3 times as long to tie. So yeah, works super good. So that's it. Tungsten Surveyor. Do you guys have any questions before we sorry, I'm gonna try and I don't think that's maybe I'll try and turn my camera around for the next one just so you guys I think it'll focus better on my back camera instead of the front one, but any questions?
Fished them with the Euro rig or?
No, I haven't ever actually really tried Euro nymphing. I don't know. I've had such good success doing it with a dropper, and I guess for me, I love fishing those places for the reason of dry fly takes or those surface takes. So I know Euro nymphing can be a lot more effective at certain times, but I just don't. I think it would be a great pattern to do it with, though.
I was out on the castle and nothing on dries one afternoon, so I rigged up a Euro rig and caught a 20-inch cutthroat on something
Nice.
pretty much big as this. So that's why I was just wondering if you ever tried them out there.
Yeah, like certainly I'll go deep, you know, if it's not working right. I you know, it's more of indicator fishing than Euro nymphing, you know, like I'll tie on a piece of split shot underneath a hopper and get her down 6 feet in a nice slow pool and sometimes even deeper. And I pulled fish out with them, but like the actual Euro nymphing technique, no, I haven't done that. But so again, you know, if you're wanting to get deep, I would put lead wraps in here, maybe a bigger bead just to get her down faster. But for the most part, this has been pretty successful for me. So. So I'm gonna bear with me a second here. I don't know where this is pointing right now. It's probably right in the middle of my chest, but I'm just going to turn my camera around and I'm going to get a fly in here and see if I can focus in nice and close on it. And then we'll go from there. How is that? Is that better?
Yes, it's good. Sharper.
Sharper, yeah. A little more in focus, eh? So, if you guys haven't already, if you want to try and do one, so again, just put the bead on the hook with the slot facing back. So it goes around the bend of the hook. And you'll see, well, hopefully now that it's sharper, that's how I would, it kind of, you got to try it one way. It's going to sit down further onto the eye. And that's how I like it. So it's a little bit, the weight's more forward and it's going to balance out a little bit better. Whereas if it's the other way, it's going to sit like that and it's not going to go forward as much. It's not going to balance as easy. So you want that bead to sit nice and deep into that eye like that, if that makes sense.
Colin, that's
Yes.
that's the toughest part of the whole fly.
It is. Like I said, this
Getting
is
the bead
this
on
is-
that hook. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I already lost one in here somewhere. I don't know where it went. It is definitely, it is by far the hardest part. Like, this is such an easy pattern. Again, why I love it. Like, I can bang out a dozen of these in, I don't know, probably a half an hour, you know? So, again, things that I'm looking for when I'm tying flies is effectiveness, ease of tying, durability. And if I can meet all three of those, like that's a perfect fly to me. I'm more of a, I tie because I use them and I tie because I can't get them anywhere else. And I'm usually more of a pressure tire. Again, why I like this is because I don't get motivated to do anything about fly tying until I'm going to be fishing in 3 days. So, you know, if I'm going to the old man in 3 days, I know I can bang a bunch of these out. So
Also a great pattern, pack everything and take in my camper. You don't need a lot of stuff.
you don't need a lot of stuff. Exactly. It's like one tiny little pack of hooks,
Yeah,
one tiny little pack of beads, one feather will probably do, like one like this, you'd probably do 20 flies on that.
yeah.
And then like this pack of dubbing, I don't know how many, well, you've each got enough to do how many, and I took it out of this package. I've still got, like, I don't know. You could probably do 200 flies with that pack of dubbing. So you might run out of a 200-yard spool of thread before you run out of that dubbing.
A few packs of hooks.
But you packs of hooks for sure. But yeah, so if you guys can see, I really like to get that locked in with a nice spool or base of thread. If you don't, it's fine, but it tends to jump around a little bit when you're tying, like especially if you're a little bit rammy like me at times. And then it'll offset and it won't be seated right. I've had it where I haven't locked that in and you go back to the front and I'm tied in and it's like, oh, the bead flipped around and now it's not in the right position. So you got to go, you know, it's just easier to lock it in right from the start. So that bead is locked in. And again, I'm going to make nice tight wraps with my thread to get a decent base. Like it doesn't have to be crazy, but I like to make sure that that hook is nicely covered with that orange thread so it shines through a little bit. With your Coq de Leon, if you can see that, again, not a crazy amount of fibers. I'm saying 10, but that's probably like 15, I don't know. But just a nice little clump and about, I don't know, I guess maybe from the bead to the thread, you know, 2/3 of the hook shank. I don't think it matters too much. I would err on shorter rather than longer. This certainly wouldn't be like a woolly bugger where you want to tie it the same length as the hook shank, but you know, if you're at the hook shank length, that's fine, or shorter. Gonna wrap that in just to cover up the tail. Again, to get that thread to shine through. Tie in your wire. And then you're dubbing. I've never used this on still water, so I don't really know. I suspect it would probably do okay. I would maybe use it more like on a scud hook. You could do something with like definitely this dubbing on a scud hook as a scud imitation, I think would work really, really well. But the next pattern I'll show is one I have used on still water. So, and again, just making nice tight wraps all the way up. I don't really worry about tapering the body right off the bat. I like to, usually what I do is just dub the body level and then go back halfway and start to build up that front portion of the body. And again, less is more. I'd way rather do more wraps with the dubbing than less with a really thick noodle. It just, it's not as durable. It'll foul better or foul more. Yeah, just like that. Somewhat. And if you don't have a great taper, I don't think it matters either. Usually, you know, where I fish these, the water's moving pretty quick. Fish don't have a whole lot of time to react. So, I think if your taper is out, that's probably not the reason they're not biting it. And then your ribbing, just a nice, I don't know, 4, 5 ribs, nice and even.
I'm kind of busy.
And then just twist the ribbing, or you can cut it. But if you're cutting it, always make sure to cut it with in here of your scissors, not your tip, or use an older pair of scissors so it doesn't dull them. And then just make that nice hot spot thread base. Whip finish or half hitch, however you want to do it. And it's done. I have used these in Cypress as well. Again, more moving water under a hopper, or I know it was probably in June this year. We had a good brown drake hatch, and we were fishing nymphs underneath big brown drakes and doing well on this pattern. Pheasant tails, prince nymphs that didn't really seem to be too much there. So again, just really demonstrating the jig nymph. There's lots of different ways or lots of different patterns to do in this style. I'll just do a quick rotary of that. This I did not tie, so I'm not going to take credit, but just basically a jig style prince nymph. Again, the benefit of just this is going to ride like this in the water column, so your hook is up. Less chance of fouling, less chance of getting dull. I can't remember. I had a bunch of other ones here. This little guy. I just put some dubbing together, kind of a brown copper. Nice and small. The hooks wise, sorry, I forgot to talk about that earlier. The Eric's jig hooks, this is an FW 551. Very nice hook. I like it. It's a little bit stouter than, say, a Daiichi, whatever that is, 40, Merv, you would know off the top of your head, 4671, is it? It's a little shorter in the shank and a little wider gap, which I do like the wider gap in these jig style hooks. Just gives you more gap there, especially with the 60-degree bend. TMCO 403 is a good hook. I've used that as well. So any 60-degree bend hook, but I do like these Eric's hooks. They're shorter, they're a little shorter and a little bit wider gap than some of the other ones. So that's why I like to use these. So I'm gonna turn it back around, and if you guys want to try your second, if you haven't already, and ask any questions, which you're probably doing just fine. Bob, you were walking down on the creek there. No, he's gone. Oh, there he's back. You lost your net somewhere.
Uh,
Sorry, Colin, what was that you said?
I just said you were walking along the creek there looking for your net, or?
Yeah, second time I've lost it. I was really surprised one time when I'd lost my net and came back a few hours later. I'd driven away to another creek, came back, and it only took me about 15 minutes to find it in the willows.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Colin, your white shirt as a background is just perfect. I think all people demonstrating the fly should wear a white shirt.
Oh, well, that's good. I was kind of worried about this one just because it's such a whitish pattern, but the next one will be even better because we'll do it in olive. But
using olive thread on the next one, Colin?
pardon me?
Using olive thread on the next one?
I use olive thread, yeah.
Big fly, I'm assuming?
It's big. It's the same size as the last one.
No. Big fly thread. Come on.
Oh, big fly thread, sure.
Size 14, that should be fun.
Yeah.
I'm using 8-aught.
And I use 6. I mean, 6 is fine. Uni, UTC, thread make doesn't really matter in here. Gonna check that. Sorry, I was mentioning the Daiichi jig hooks before, and it's a 46, 47, 60-degree bend. I do like this hook. I would use this more on even the next pattern, probably more so than the first pattern. Typically bigger hooks, you know, size 10, size 12 for micro leeches, micro balance leeches. Definitely size 10 or size 8 for balance leeches. I like these hooks a little bit more than the Mustad 32883 or whatever. They're just a little stronger, but you can see this is the Daiichi size 14. If you can see that, it's quite a bit longer. So specifically for this first pattern, I do like that Eric's hook. It's just a little more stout. And a TMCO 403 would be pretty close to this Eric's hook. So
Okay.
Everybody's still tying, looks like, so we'll give you a couple more minutes to finish that last one off. Anybody have any questions so far?
So Colin, with this one, do you err on the side of buggy or clean and tight?
I'm more clean and tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one I just like a nice tapered, clean body. I don't like it to be too bushy. I don't brush it out. It'll eventually get pretty buggy if you start catching with it, but I don't know. It's funny, I was talking to Mitchell last night and we were just talking about fishing down on the Old Man, and we went down in, I think it was early July, and had seen a few Yellowstone shucks, so I tied on a tan and gold Chernobyl ant and used this as a dropper, maybe 2 feet. I don't usually go too far, 2-3 feet under as a dropper. And I caught a couple that day, caught a couple more that evening, and it was pretty slow all around on the river. And we went back a month later and I still had that that fly and the hopper rigged up in my fly box. I tied it back on and I fished that all weekend again, and just like it was awesome. And caught on both, you know, so.
Yeah, this fly is very similar to the lightning bug, and the same one that Al tied that one time at fly tying, but this is way easier.
Way easier. Again, you know, I think this really, I can't remember. I know I watched Lance's video and I think he kind of, you know, said this is a, you know, progression from the lightning bug and inspired by it, but 100 times easier and just as good. Like I've done very, very well on lightning bugs in the past too, but I can't say it was any better or any worse than this. Like this has been very, very good for me. So
Yeah, because that Mylar wing case is a pain in the ass.
yeah, well,
lightning
that's the
bug.
thing. It is, and just I don't know. It's not, but it does take a little bit more time. Well, you've got one more material that you're putting in, and you got to tie it off and cut it. So there's just, you know, a few more steps, which isn't a really big deal. But if you're trying to bang off a whole bunch, yeah, it's just 2 more steps every fly or 3 more steps every fly, and yeah, this is just a lot easier. So is everybody done? You can't tell. Anybody that I can see tying looks to be done. Can I move on to the second fly? If not, please just scream out no. I'm not hearing no. So, okay. So the second fly, same hook. You've got 2 gold beads in your package. I like gold on this. I don't think it really matters. You could use copper, silver, whatever. It's just my OCD analness. I always, for some reason, put gold and olive together. It just, anyway, that's just what I do. So, this pattern is one I tied up last winter for Stillwater and use it kind of as a micro leech, like a very small micro leech, or or ideally why I tied it was more of a damsel imitation that I could use on an indicator rig under with a balanced leech or something like that. And kind of came about, I think it was 2 years ago. Al Grombacher and I went to fish Nesland, and his son was down from Edmonton, Andrew. And so he came out, he was in his boat, and Al and I were in mine. And I know most of you guys have fished Nesland, but I honestly, I've never had a day like Andrew had, and I've never seen anybody put on a clinic like Andrew did that day. Like he caught nine rainbows that day. And I don't think the smallest one would have been under 20. Like absolute clinic. And like every fish he caught, he was like, this is the biggest effing rainbow I've ever caught. And I was like, well, actually the first one was, but yeah, that was a really nice one. I think the biggest one he caught was about 10 pounds. And I kept it like, and Al was of course asking like, Andrew, what do you got on? And he's like, well, that little damsel nymph you tied. Of course, Al's not here, but I'm pretty sure he would attest to this, that Andrew was only using ties Al tied. If Al was my dad, I wouldn't tie flies either. But anyway, I was asking Al, like, well, what does it look like? And he's like, it's super small. And it was actually black. I think he was using, well, no, he was using black and olive. And I went through my fly box and I showed Al, he's like, nope, none of those. And he's like, super basic, just marabou body. So it kind of got me thinking, what if we did this on like a balanced, but maybe not balanced, but on a jig, so that it's close enough to being balanced and just sitting there under my indicator rig that I could tie on with another balanced leech. So I came up with this. Since I've tied this, I would probably, depending on size, many of you have probably heard of a new bead that's out there, relatively new, called the head turner beads. I'm hoping to get some of those in the next month or so. They've been pretty popular since Phil Raleigh did his video on it. But basically, with a head turner, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's almost like a teardrop bead. So all the weight is on one side, and one side's concave, one side's convex. So when you put it on a jig hook, these can sit fairly far forward, but those head turner beads are even going to be, they're going to distribute the weight probably out to a little bit further, almost past the eye of the hook, which isn't going to balance it perfectly, but it's going to be closer than this. And again, a lot easier to tie than farting around with pins and all of that. So I think the traditional, balanced leech is still optimal, but I think on a really wavy day with those head turner beads, I don't think it's going to make much difference. If you've got some action in that fly, it's going to be relatively balanced. And I find, even my flies, well, for one, they balance differently underwater than they do in the air. And for two, I don't know if it matters if it's a little bit tilted. Once it gets in the water and it's got some action, it's going to be fine. So anyway, I'll give you a story about this. I tied this sucker on this spring. I was fishing this with a balanced leech, and I don't know. It may have been one of the biggest rainbows. It's one of those fish stories, but from what one of my buddies was in the boat with me, and he's like, I'm not gonna lie, dude, I did lose it, but we knew it was on this fly. And he's like, I'm not gonna lie, man, that was probably your biggest rainbow yet. And just a tank. So you don't need big. Sometimes they're just in the mood for smaller stuff. And if you've been in Nesland, I'm sure you've seen it like I have. Damselflies swimming around in 30 feet, like there's tons in there, and they're, around this size, nice olive. And I just thought, if I can add one more tool on the line under that indicator, give it a shot. And it has worked for me. So this would be more of a still water pattern. Give it a try. again, super easy to tie. Yeah, so gold bead, get that seated in. I'm using olive thread. I'm going to seat that in. I wouldn't worry too much about a thread base on this. Get it to the back. And you guys also have some gold wire. I actually don't put wire on this one for ribbing typically, but you can. I'm gonna for this one just because you guys have it in your kits. Yeah. And I can't remember how much marabou I gave you guys. I think I just put in 2 feathers each. You don't need much. 2 is, again, more than enough. But the technique that I'm going to use for this is very similar. Actually, Al's going to tie a fly. I think it's the last one of the series back at the end of March. And kind of using the same technique. You don't need much on this, but it's just easier to do it this way than any other way. So you can keep these feathers for doing woolly bugger tails later because you're really only going to take off the tip on these. So, sorry, I forgot to turn my camera around here. Do you guys want me to turn that around again? Is that easier to see?
That's good.
It's good this way?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So I'm going to take my feather, my marabou, and I'm just going to take the tip. Like, you don't need much. That's maybe even almost too much. And just fold everything down. And really, all I'm going to tie in is this anyway. So I don't know how many strands there are there. I don't really like this feather that much, but it's good enough. And just tie that in. So this one I am probably going to do about the same length as the hook shank. This one's got some cut ends on it, so it looks kind of funny, but anyway. It's going to be a pretty blunt tail on this one, but so just going to tie in that tail. It's maybe a little long, but shorten that up just right around there. And then all I'm going to do, I'm going to bring my thread forward. And all I'm going to do is just twist this marabou and wrap it forward to make the body and hope it doesn't break.
Yeah, mine broke.
So if it does break, not a big deal. We'll just start again. The other way you could do it is kind of like a woolly bugger tail. Again, I like to take the tips, and on this one, I do kind of like the pinny, the really pinny feathers for the tail. So it makes a very, very slight tail. So maybe more like these guys. It's not going to focus very well, I'm sure. But anyway. So you could, if your tip breaks, just pull it off the side. Like that.
Yeah, forget.
And then tie those in and do kind of the same thing. It's just easier with the tip because everything's right there, but So now that my fibers are in, I'm just going to twist those with my fingers. And wrap them. Again, with the full feather, it's a lot easier to wrap them. I guess you could use a hackle plier. One more turn. And it's okay to have this. I like having a few micro barbs kind of sticking out. So it's a little bit buggy like that. When you put your ribbing through, I'm going to wrap that forward, just kind of wiggle it back and forth so it doesn't trap down all of the a bunch of fibers. You do want some to poke through just to give it a little bit more action in the water and a little bit more body substance. This one I am going to wrap the opposite way that I wrapped my my marabou fibers, so that they trap down a little better and it locks them in, makes the fly a little more durable. Tie it off, rip it off, and whip finish, and you're done. So again, another very, very, very easy fly to tie, but effective nonetheless. And, you know, especially with a head turner bead, or even on a balanced presentation on a balanced leech with a pin, you know, I wouldn't be afraid to tie them this small. Micro leeches, certainly a size 12, and especially if you're using that Daiichi 46-47, because it is a longer hook, you know, and a size 14 would be a great micro leech pattern. So either with this or a head turner bead, it's going to sit under the, you know, it is going to sit a little bit diagonal, but if you've got some chop in there, it's still going to have some great action and move around. I think really, you know, when it's balanced, if it's calm, you want it somewhat level. But when there's waves, like, you know, if you've ever seen a leech, which we all probably have, like they undulate through the water. So giving it that little bit of a jig action, I think this is still going to work fine without balancing it. And it makes the profile that much smaller, or the length that much shorter. And, you know, when we're looking for a smaller leech, I want to go to as heavy as a hook as I can. You know, again, we're fishing Neslin, any of the lakes like up north that we have here, you've got a good potential of catching a decent sized fish. And I personally like the Mustad 32833s in a size 10. I've straightened those out on fish. The Daiichi, not so much. I've caught some nice fish on size 10s and they haven't straightened. They're just a little bit stronger and better. So, and that's it. Just, I don't even have a name for it. Just kind of a pseudo balanced damselfly micro leech. I'd tie it in black, claret, brown, olive, and you could play around with sizes on it, stuff too. So
I've tied similar thing on a scud hook.
yeah, you could do it on a scud too.
Yeah, fish it on an intermediate line. And
yep, absolutely.
As well, Colin, pale colors like a cream, or when they're shucking and they're changing, is really an effective fly as well.
Okay, good
In
to know.
that size.
Yes, awesome. Thanks, Rick. Yeah, like a tan or cream marabou would be good.
Yeah, more creamy, a creamy tan kind of, almost
Okay.
a tinge of pink in it almost, and it's quite effective at when they're shucking, you know.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Rick, for sure. Yeah, so I mean, again, like
Yeah.
color combinations, endless, really. But yeah, that's an excellent point, Rick. I'll have to try that for sure. And I've never cast this and stripped it, but I don't see why you couldn't. It would work just fine. Again, there's way better damsel patterns out there than this, but it's easy, it's quick, and it works. So typically when I rig these up, so it's always kind of funny doing a multiple rig under an indicator. And I've had a few conversations with a few guys on this call about this too. And maybe for those of you that I haven't had this conversation, you can chime in on your experience on this. But typically when I'm rigging multiple flies under an indicator, I'm always going to put my balance leech at the bottom just because it's easiest and it's going to balance. You can't really tie. Well, you could, but it would throw off the balance. To do two balance leeches in tandem, tying into that first balance leech, it's the second one's going to pull it out. So typically what I'll do is either off of my double surgeon's knot is leave a tag end longer. Of course, when you're tying it in, you always want to tie on to the leader portion of the knot. But that's a conversation for another time maybe. Or I'll tie in off of barrel swivel. You could use tippet rings and tying in two different lines so that one will actually balance. So you could tie this in first with a balance leech below. I think when you're doing that, depending on how the fish are taking, you really need to be ultra focused on that indicator. And if it's windy, it can make it a little bit tough because I and maybe I'm wrong on this, but my thought is that if you've got your second fly that's or your first fly that's sitting off, it's hanging here with a very short piece of leader. If a fish comes in very slowly and just sucks it in, that it's going to just go up like that and go in. And it's going to be very, very subtle on that indicator. And I'm pretty sure I've missed a lot. So, you have to, like, it's not going to go all the way under if it just sucks it in. Where if it's on the bottom, I think it has a little bit, it's more direct, tied into your indicator. So it's going to show a little more movement. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd want them all to just smack either one, pull the indicator 2 feet under and you're good to go. But that doesn't happen. We all know that the indicator goes down when you're having a sip of beer, eating a sandwich or whatever. So, or just looking at birds. That happens to me all the time. Just looking at scenery, come back, look back. Oh, my bobber just came back to the surface. I guess I missed that one. So curious to know, like, how does everybody else rig their balance leeches on an indicator rig if you're fishing more than two balance flies? I do chironomids quite a bit where I'll tie them in line, which again is a little bit more direct contact with
You
that
can
line.
take a short piece of tippet, tie a perfection loop, and loop it around the top above your triple surgeons. Like you said, come off your triple surgeon style. Now, if that gets cut too short, just take like a foot and a half of tippet, tie a perfection loop in one end, just loop it, pull it tight, and then gives you the same thing above the triple surgeons loop.
Sorry, Evan, can you say that again? I didn't.
Yeah, you got your main leader coming down your triple surgeons loop here. Tie your triple surgeons knot or whatever you use. Tie a perfection loop in a short piece of tippet. Loop it around the leader above, pull it tight, and it'll actually stick out a little ways away from that because of that perfection loop, and you can tie another fly on. So you can put 2 balance leeches off that as well.
Okay.
So if you're running the one off your knot, that gets cut too short, then you don't have to rebuild your whole leader. You can just tie that on.
Yeah.
Gets a little interesting when you start cutting those off because they're kind of a pain to get off your leader. Sometimes you have these little takes sticking out all over.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's how I do them quite often. So
Okay.
I've tried rigging them ahead of time so I could flip them and put them on, but that sort of works.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all know fishing more than one fly can lead to a lot of frustration at times, especially
Yeah.
when you throw an indicator into the mix and like 3 flies on your line. Like you are, it is
At
a
15
gamble.
feet a leader or something.
Yeah. It's a huge gamble, and at some point you're going to lose, but whatever. I mean, you just cut her off and start over again. But
Yeah,
especially on a windy day, which we tend to have a few of in this province.
yeah,
So,
especially this country.
yep. So I see a number of you are tying already. So yeah, I'll kind of go through it again, if you like.
Yes.
What I did with my wire. And again, kind of again, you know, less is more on this fly. If you've seen damsel flies, they are very slender. There's not a lot to them, so you don't want it too thick, too much material. It's very easy to do. I will confess, I have a tendency to overdress my flies rather than under. How'd everybody make out?
I think you did that in about a minute, Colin, not counting the time it takes to put the bead on the hook, which for me is about 15 minutes.
It's again, yeah, it's the hardest part of tying these.
I actually managed to drop both of the gold beads that you gave us and had to go substitute something else.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
the
we should
worst.
get extra beads in our kit.
Drop the hooks and put them into your foot. I've done that down here enough times.
At least you found it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
found it.
renovated this basement last spring, and Mom and Dad were helping me build a wall, and Mom's picking hooks out of the carpet down here, left, right, and center. She's like, how many do you drop? I said, too many.
Yeah. Yeah, I suspect if these beads got into some nice shag, you'd probably lose them forever.
This isn't shag, but just
Until you stood on them.
I even on concrete, once they fall on there, I can't see them. They're gone
they
forever.
bounce. They bounce so bad off concrete.
Yeah, they bounce and roll, and I'm sure they're all in the vacuum, but
My
I mean,
old house, my old
probably
house
found
had-
half of the ones I've dropped.
my
You need
old
a
house
good
had a funny
magnet to
little
drag
room
around.
partway down the stairs. It was 6 by 7 with a 6 foot ceiling. I couldn't stand up in it. That was my fly tying room. And it had 2 by 6 planks for the floor. I know there's hooks and beads between those planks.
Can you just close up on your fly, Colin?
Sure. If that,
Okay, thanks. Oh, mine are so ugly. Okay.
yeah, this one isn't great, but again, you know, once it's wet, it's,
I didn't say yours was ugly. I said mine was ugly.
oh. It's kind of out of focus there. Here, I'll, if that's better, I'll try and.
Yeah, that's pretty good there.
Okay, yeah.
Plugged in all night and already the battery's not plugged in here.
I'll put that one in there because that's a little nicer looking, but yeah, that's basically it. Just
Yeah.
super simple. I didn't even rib this one. I just tied them, and I think this one is on, this is actually on a Daiichi. So it is a little bit longer. You can tell that one versus that. They're both a size 14, if you can see that. Maybe try this. Yeah, it's working.
Colin, do you have a typical size that you tie?
These are size 14s. I would do them, you know, like I would do these right up to even bigger. Like, sorry, this isn't, it's going to drop a little bit, but you can see the one in the vise is a Daiichi 14. The one on my bodkin is the Eric's 14. So they are a little shorter. But I'm just going to find, you know, like you could even do this style again with a traditional balanced leech style with a pin. This is a Daiichi size 10, quite a bit bigger, but you know, and again, because you've got the pin on there, so it's going to add another, whatever that is, 1/4 of an inch. But I would tie this and it's size 12, even, and using very much the same technique. You know, these skinny little leeches in a variety of colors. Sorry, just grabbing a few more. Are very effective. I've caught a lot of nice rainbows on just small little leeches like this, especially in fall, under an indicator. And I would easily tie these in a size 12, like the Daiichi 12, and a 14. The Daiichis are a little bit bigger even than the Mustad, so this would be very similar in size, fly size. A size 10, 46, 47 Daiichi would be about the same as a size 8 Mustad 32, 33 or 3833, whatever it is. Just, I don't know, the shank's a little bit longer, but they are a nicer, heavier, stouter hook. So. Yeah. For these ones, for these leech patterns, I didn't, you could absolutely do the technique of just twisting your marabou and wrapping it. These, because they were a little bit longer, I just tied in the tail, and then I just basically take a bunch of the marabou fibers like this. I take off the butts because they'll tend to be white, so I'll cut those off or rip them off, and then I'll just dub that onto my thread and just make a dubbing noodle out of your marabou, and it works really well. So
Good.
I just put a Anyhow, I'm gonna go take that. I'm gonna take that.
You see that?
Yes.
You see? That's I would say a 12. And then
Nice. Yep.
probably a 14.
Yep. In a claret.
That's yeah. Straggle string.
Okay. Yep.
That real fine stuff from Semper Fly, I think.
Yep.
Just a standard. I think that's a slotted bead.
Yep. Yeah. So same kind of thing. Like, I'll do. Sorry, I'm just grabbing it. But, doing smaller balanced leeches, like a vampire leech with, like a straggle string or
Yeah.
brill, same kind of thing, nice and sparse, but very effective. Like I've fished lots of, these were actually just done with regular polar chenille, so they're a little bit thicker, but they work well. Again, a balanced vampire leech in a variety of colors. I love olive with a chartreuse bead, really love brown with an orange bead, purple with a pink bead. Play around with them, but yeah, lots of different options, and I found them all to work very, very well. And sorry.
Hey, Colin, thanks a lot. I got to leave. It's Pat. So thank you so much for this morning.
Yeah, you bet, Pat. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So again, pretty easy, short. I don't even know what time we're at here, but yeah. Anybody have any questions about any of these or comments? I don't see anybody really tying anymore. So, so next week, the 12th, same time, Merv is going to do a chironomid pattern. Looking forward to that. I know Merv has fished a lot of chironomids. So Merv, you were originally from Saskatchewan, moved to BC, came back to Saskatchewan. Oh, you're on mute. Merv, you're on mute.
Turn your sound on, man.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. Originally from Saskatchewan, moved to Alberta, then to BC, back to Alberta, and then back to Saskatchewan.
And this winter, you're probably dreading that.
I've fished chironomids now in all three provinces, and I mean, it was, the likes of Brian Chan, Phil Rowley that, sparked my interest in that. And they've been extremely successful for me. And again, the options and colors and styles are virtually endless. So yeah, it's interesting. Hope to have quite a few people tune in next Saturday, and we'll see if we can spark some interest.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Merv. I appreciate it. And again, like like Murph said, I think the new materials, the new UV resins and things like that, the chironomid tying these days has it's a whole lot different than, you know, even 5 years ago. And I see some of these from the guys in BC and even and yours, Merv, like the intricacies. You don't think of chironomids as being all that intricate, but we're getting into some really crazy, cool stuff, blended threads, and it just multi levels of such a small pattern that amaze me when I see some of these done. So looking forward to it.
You bet.
Colin, thanks very much for doing this. For the rest of you, Colin puts a pile of work, I think, into these 5 sessions, trying to line up 5 fly tires to start with. I don't know what he threatens them with to get them to come, but whatever he's doing, it's successful. And then he organizes all the materials, all the little plastic bags, gets everything put together and a schedule together, and we get to go buy a little package of flies and tie 5 new flies. So it works really good, and I think you can tell by the turnout, it's there's lots of interest. So thanks a lot, Colin, for your work on this.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. My pleasure, and thanks, Darren, for organizing pickup and all that stuff too. So
no problem. I had the easy job.
Well, we had a little bit
going. They're fun.
We had a little bit of well, it's just the way shipping is these days and getting stuff. It's like but we got it done right at the end of the wire. Merv actually introduced me into a new product called Chronic Cuts. So if any of you guys are into tying chironomids with anti-static bag or different things, this is a game changer. I mean, I've tried cutting anti-static bag with a ruler and a knife and all that stuff. And like, it's such a pain in, like, pardon me, it's such a pain in the ass. It's why I don't even do it, because it's like, you can't get it that thin. So anyway, this company is a fabrication company. It must have fabricated, you know, a cutter. And so this stuff's pre-cut, 1/2 mil, perfect. Like, it's so easy. You just cut off a strip and tie her in, and so anyway, that's what we were waiting for these packages. And as I took them out to Darren's on Sunday. Pardon me?
Yeah. You know what a cry cut is?
Yeah, that's what
you go to Michael's. Yeah, it's a cry cut machine.
Oh.
They got them at Michael's, and they'll cut the strips for you like that.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So that's what these, I think there's 2 or 3 people in BC have done this. And they've gone to auto supply houses and got all the different window tints.
Yeah, yeah. So it's opal, red, bronze, anti-static bag, olive. Yeah, it's a lot easier. You just cut her up and tie it in. So
and you
anyway,
brought
that's kind of what we were waiting for. And they all came in time. So hopefully you guys all got your kits and everything. So
good. All right. Thanks, Colin.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. You have a great rest of the weekend, and hopefully you don't have too much snow to shovel. It's
very well done.
Thanks, Dennis. Good to see you.
See you, Dennis. See you, Cam.
Thanks,
Colin.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Colin.